Hey writers, this is our last video and I hope it is useful. You know where you can find me if you have questions and I'll be available for you guys after the class ends too. You can always email me and Wet Ink will stay up for about a week after the class ends. So I do want to hear from you, but let's just dive in. So today we are going to talk about publishing and what happens next. And so I want to get started with you, and I'm sure you'll have questions. So please add them to the discussion forum in Wet Ink. There are many ways to publish your book. And when I was coming up and I was in school for journalism and writing, it was not cool to self-publish. That meant that you were kind of a loser in the publishing circles. It's no longer the case, which I'm super happy about because this gives writers a lot of paths to publishing. And the thing to remember when you're looking to get published is that the publishing industry is a business that's out to make money. And so when they say yes to you or they say no to you, it has to do with whether or not they can make money off your book, not whether or not you're a great writer. And it's really, really, really important to remember. There are lots of mediocre writers that get publishing deals, and there are lots of fantastic writers that don't. So it's important to separate your self-worth and your confidence from your publishing path. Now, I'll tell you quickly, I've had 10 books published. 8 of them were published traditionally, which means that somebody else chose them and paid to publish them. I didn't make any money from any of them. I didn't try to be fair. There was absolutely no marketing done on any of the books. There were 6 nonfiction books and 2 poetry collections. It was just a labor of love, something I did on the side, and I didn't really think I could make money at it. When I started writing fiction, I decided how I wanted to publish. And at first I did query a little. As you guys will see in Wet Ink, I shared a couple of my query letters. And I actually got a deal, an offer from a publisher, but I turned it down. I didn't like the deal. I didn't think it was a good contract. And something in my gut was telling me that I wanted to do this my own way. And I've never been happier. I love the way I publish. I started a publishing company called Scotia Road Books. We publish books for and by women over 40 with strong voices. And so it's a hybrid press, but it's how I publish all my books. And I love being in control. I love every step of the process. I love working with the cover designers, and I love setting my own timeline. And because I'm a marketing expert, and all authors have to do their own marketing, I get to keep more of the profits, which is really great. So there are 3 basic ways to publish: through an agent and or traditional publisher, self-publishing, or hybrid. There's pros and cons to everything. If you go with an agent, you have somebody who's championing your career and they're your advocate. They might be your first reader, which is great. They also take usually a 15% cut of all your profits. And but of course they do everything for you. They sell your book and then the publisher does everything, which is great. But they do everything, which means you don't have a lot of say. You have some say, but not a lot. And it's their timeline. Traditional publishing takes a really long time. It can be 2 years from the time you get your contract until the book comes out. You could be pitching agents for a year and a half before you find one. They could be shopping your book for 2 years before they sell it. Of course, it could all happen really fast too. So just know the timeline. Nowadays, unless you're a really big name, a traditional publisher doesn't do a lot of marketing on your behalf. About 6 months is what they do, and then you're on your own. And if your book doesn't sell a lot, you may not get a second book contract from them. So there are pros and cons. However, they are bigger, they have more weight, there is more acceptance and approval and validation in the industry, and your book will be in more places. Of course, that's not, doesn't mean it's going to sell. If you're going to go with an agent in traditional publishing, you're going to want to query them. And there are certain processes for query letters. It's about 400 words at the longest, and you want to have specific components. I go into detail in Wet Ink about this, and I've shared 2 of my query letters so that you can see an example. I got great responses to my query letters. It's not as easy to write a query letter as it might be to write a book, to be honest. So there are people that can review them for you and edit them, which is something I strongly consider the first time you go around. One thing to know is that if your query letter gets a lot of responses and at requests for full, which means requesting the full manuscript, um, and then you don't hear anything else, then you know your query letter is strong, but your manuscript is not. If you don't get responses to your query letter, there's a problem with the query letter. And so that's really important to nail that process. You do want to find comp titles, which are comparable books that have been published within the last 5 years, and which can show the agents or publishers where your book will sit on the shelf and give them a sense of what it is. So here's a great resource to find comp titles. It's really important to find the right ones because it sets an expectation for the person who's considering your manuscript. Self-publishing is another way to publish. There are pros and cons, of course. And the truth is that it's really about what you want to spend your time doing. You will spend more time in the self-publishing realm because you're going to be working on every aspect of publishing. And you may not want to do that, but a lot of people say they want a traditional publisher because they don't know anything about marketing. That's not a reason to do it because you're still going to have to market anyway. And so just keep that in mind. You're probably going to want to develop a platform for yourself. Social media isn't essential for publishing and book marketing, but it's a good tool. It's not going to sell a ton of books, but it's good to be findable online out there. So that is something you want to do regardless of your publishing path. Hybrid publishing is sort of a happy medium. There is a vetting process for the press. So you submit like you would to a traditional publisher and they decide whether or not to take you on. And then you pay a pretty hefty sum for them to publish your book. But they have distribution down. They have people on staff to do all the formatting and editing and everything for you. You'll also build a community amongst other writers. The biggest hybrid press that I know is She Writes Press, and people that I know who publish with them love it. So it's definitely something to think about. My publishing house, Scotia Road Books, is hybrid. There's a lot of them, so you really want to check them out and make sure they're legit and not a scam. These are a lot of resources to help you in your publishing process. On Query Tracker, you can find agents and know exactly how they want to be approached. Submittable and Poets and Writers are resources to find both Submittable is to find publishers. Poets and Writers, you can find agents and publishers. Manuscript Wishlist is also from agents. And there are lots of small presses out there that you could pitch directly. You'd want to query them the same way you would an agent, but they don't need an agent to go in between the writer and them. You can Google to find a lot of those. You can also find them on Poets and Writers, Writers Digest, Publishers Marketplace. Those are all places that have these resources. And the fabulous website and podcast, The Shit No One Tells You About Writing, is really a great resource to listen to it if you have not already. In Wet Ink, you will find a few resources. These are articles. I told you there's 2 of my query letters. There's an article about landing a literary agent and an article about 10 bestsellers that began as self-published books. With that in mind too, you want to think about there's a couple of popular authors today that were self-published. Colleen Hoover started self-publishing, and she's only from a big press now because they came to her because she was so successful as a self-published author. One of her books just made it into a movie. It Ends With Us. It's fantastic, and she has a cameo in that movie, which is really cool. Lucy Score is a self-published author who's wildly successful and has been for about 10 years. So take a look at what they do and see what works best for you. That's time to offer. If you have questions, you know how to find me. Thank you so much for taking this class. I've been really enjoying my time with you, and I hope it's been useful and you've gotten a ton of pages written.